So excellent. Awesome. So we're going to build on everything that you guys just shared. I thought it would be helpful to do a recap. And hold on, let me just send. All right, can you guys hear that? That's my granddaughter. Let me just send a quick text to my daughter who's now babysitting. Okay. So let me share my screen and we'll do a recap and then we'll build on what we're learning. Since I'm blind, let me make this a little bigger. Okay. So recapping our emotional flashbacks. Emotional flashbacks are sudden and often prolonged regressions to the overwhelming feeling states of being an abused and abandoned child. So just to explain, sudden meaning you don't choose them. You're not saying this reminds me of that. It literally happens before you have any thought of what just happened. And it's prolonged in the sense that an emotional flashback can last minutes, it can last hours, it can last days. Sometimes in the beginning of our recovery, we feel like they are always happening. So really kind of take a moment right now. And with what we've been learning, seeing like how often do emotional flashbacks happen for you? And this is just a mental note for you to keep track of, because the recovery journey usually starts out where we are in one never-ending emotional flashback. And then we get moments of coming out, and then those moments continue to grow. So just taking a moment to kind of reflect on how they affect you. Something else that we learned is that they include unnecessary firing of the fight, flight, freeze response. Keyword being unnecessary. And we're going to really talk about this today, the difference between real danger and perceived danger. They're hard to identify because the emotions felt during an emotional flashback have no visual component. And so as a result, we only have the feelings to go on. And so we think that we are reacting to the present, and the present is the problem. When the truth is the present is reminding us, or reminding our nervous system of an unresolved problem from the past. So just pausing and seeing if that resonates. Like if you've ever been in an emotional flashback and been like, oh, it's because they're doing this, and then realizing that the reason it bothers you to that degree is because there's something going on underneath. There's an intense felt sense of danger, regardless of how safe you currently are. So we talked about, I think in week 1, I shared how I would go into an emotional flashback when I was in the front seat of a car. And people could tell me, Michelle, look, you're safe. I could visually see that I was safe, but to my body, I couldn't convince it. I could be like, yeah, you're safe. And my body would be like, oh no, I don't feel safe. So there's a felt sense of danger. We also talked about what recovery looks like, because I think that sometimes we are so excited and ready to heal, which we want to be, but we have to understand that it's not an overnight process. I think it was Josh that mentioned today, like this topic is a situation or a topic that we should revisit regularly, because recovery looks like our emotional flashbacks become gradually less intense and less frequent. And then our ability to regulate our emotions becomes stronger. But it's a gradual shifting. We have to really understand that and kind of support ourselves and be compassionate and patient with ourselves on the journey. We talked about trauma loops, right? I think it was that mentioned it, those loops where there's stories in our nervous system. And if we take the time, that was in week 2, to change the meaning, it starts to help us to lessen intensity of emotional flashbacks. And then last week, we talked about the biology of emotional flashbacks. In other words, it's not just something in our head. It's not just an emotion, but our body is going through a certain process. Certain hormones get kicked on. Our autonomic nervous system reacts in certain ways. And so we need to help overcome them by inviting the body on the journey as well. And part of that, we started doing the create space exercise, which may be like, why are we doing this exercise? Like we're pretending there's a boulder. Why are we doing that? Well, we're teaching our nervous system that we can go into a trauma response and complete it. So for example, with narcissistic abuse, a lot of it started in childhood, and our body would go into fight or flight, but we couldn't fight and we couldn't flee. And so we would freeze, right? And then that habit of starting a trauma response and automatically going into freeze becomes habitual. We're not choosing it, it just happens. And so we want to start helping